KPMG, 66% of employees believe that new technologies, including AI, will enhance productivity in the next 3 years. However, 36% of organizations lack clarity on how their workforce needs to evolve to meet future business demands. This underscores leadership's need to embrace upskilling and AI integration while aligning workforce strategies with business goals. Hello, everyone. This is Manu, the Chief Business Officer at KNOLSKAPE, and I welcome you all to another episode of The Learning Curve powered by KNOLSKAPE. Today, I have the perfect leader to talk about organization development and transformation, Gunjan Shroff, who's a partner people and organization advisory at KPMG Lower Gulf. With a career spanning over 18 years across geographies, dedicated to people and strategy at KPMG Lower Gulf, Gunjan has led large-scale transformation engagements, leveraging her deep expertise to deliver strategic insights across organization design, workforce shaping, leadership development, and rewards and transformation. Gunjan also spearheads initiatives in inclusion, diversity, and equity, demonstrating a steadfast commitment to fostering workplaces where every individual can thrive. Hi, Gunjan. Welcome to the Learning Curve, and I hope you've had a great start to the new year.
Thank you, Manu. Good afternoon, and I appreciate the lovely warm welcome and the introduction. Hope you had a lovely new year too.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And we are super excited to have you with us,
The
Gunjan.
pleasure is all mine.
And just to keep the excitement and for our listeners, I have a quick rapid fire section for you. This was something totally unplanned because we thought it's a new year, and just to warm up things, it is going to be about 3 to 4 questions getting thrown at you, and would love to hear your thoughts out.
Okay,
Uh,
sure.
One leadership skill that will be non-negotiable in the next decade. Gunjan, any quick thoughts?
Adaptability.
Wow, that's a great one. And I can't but help ask you this, with your massive experience in large-scale transformation engagements, any transformation initiative, and you could keep anything confidential, whatever you want to, any transformative initiative you're most proud of?
Creating ownership for line managers. I think that's primarily the most important change that organizations need to go through.
Right,
And
right,
because accountability, especially when it comes to HR, is no longer just meant to be with HR, and it's more about driving and creating that leadership across the entire layers of the organization.
right, right. Excellent. And since we are into talent transformation, learning and development, and any one book which has been inspirational for you in the last couple of months, weeks, that have deeply influenced your professional philosophy, or has impacted you in a way which you hold close to your heart?
There's a book called Multipliers, if you've heard of it. It basically
Yes.
talks about multiplying leaders at every level in your organization and
Right,
not creating dependency on just one leader. So for me,
right.
that goes hand in hand with the line manager accountability I spoke about as well.
Super. Excellent. Uh, Two more questions, Gunjan, and thank you for your patience. We all lead a fast-paced work life, and in the midst of all the confusion and the distractions, what is your go-to method for keeping or staying ahead on the learning curve, or to ensure that there's continuous learning, because you're leading something very, very critical in your organization. How do you manage to keep your learning curve ahead?
Yeah, I spoke about adaptability. I think the fact that you are willing to change and invest that time in one, not only learning from external information that comes in, but also inherently looking for that change. As a
Right.
consultant, I thrive in that chaos and constantly ensure that at least, even whether it's millennials, Gen Z, or anybody new that joins the organization, brings in the new ideas, new thoughts, and I think that really keeps me personally on my toes and allows me to continuously be relevant, because I believe that's one skill that you cannot and should not let go in the next many generations.
Absolutely. I think I take that from you, adaptability, what you've spoken about. And my last question from the rapid fire round, Gunjan, for you is inclusion or innovation? What's your priority?
I don't think you can innovate without having inclusion in your,
Yes,
characteristic of the organization and the culture of your own organization. So I believe that both cannot both need to coexist, and one cannot
right.
happen without the other.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Gunjan. Really insightful answers, and our listeners would have got to know you better. We shall now move into the larger conversation for which this podcast was planned. And again, going back to something which strikes out from your 18 years of experience, the large-scale transformation engagements that you've been leading, through your responsibilities, and also to the fact that we've now got into 2025, which is considered to be a defining year on the talent and on the leadership framework. What, according to you, are the key trends that are likely to shape the future of workforce and talent strategies? Anything that you feel is going to be very different from what's been happening in the past?
Yeah. I think that organizations since COVID are focusing a lot on productivity in general. And one is whether it's exploration of digital tools or integration of artificial intelligence through hybrid workforce models. They are primarily driving the agenda of improving productivity, and the productivity is not necessarily only in terms of the output of every individual's exercise, but it also comes with employee well-being. So
Yeah,
organizations are laying balancing importance on both employee productivity as well as employee well-being, and I think that's
right,
here to stay, because the
right,
more the newer workforce joins, the newer generation rather joins the organizations and the workforce as well, you'll see that working with purpose, having a healthy work-life balance, and actually managing your own mental and overall well-being is of utmost priority to
absolutely.
the new workforce joining. So that's one. And secondly, I believe that overall driving the digital agenda remains to be on top priority. Of course, I would say that there are a lot of organizations who are going through this process of understanding it, what it really means, because I know it's become a very commonly used topic and everybody talks about it. But very few organizations are actually going forward and conducting pilots and experiments and trying their hand at the most strategic aspects of applying technology. So I think organizations are still trying their hands at chatbot, automating things like policies and processes, but how you really convert your workforce into realities of which processes can be automated, how they can actually then focus on only current jobs that cannot be automated and then focus on strategic activities and tasks, leads us to talk about more about the future of a workforce and the what we call internally at KPMG as generation.ai, which all is talking about future workforce and how we're going to now shape our workforce in the future.
Great insights again, and I'm continuing to what you mentioned, Gunjan, where you're talking about well-being and also the fact that technology is coming together. So it's a mix of technology where you really need to balance the well-being of the employees. Uh, you know, based on your experience, what are some of the challenges do you think leaders are facing when you need to foster in a human-centric workplace? You have an onslaught of technology coming at you, but as you rightly said, how do you ensure that there is a human-centric workplace where elements of empathy still stay on?
Yeah, I think involving people in the process is probably the only answer for any kind of change. Today, it's
Yeah,
become a very commonly spoken about subject that people are apprehensive about new digital tools. We are all going through a digital transformation, but the reality is COVID brought that, hybrid work brought
yeah.
that, going back to work brought that, and in all cases of change and growth across many decades, I believe that the more the people are involved in the entire journey of that change, the more impactful that change and transformation process is. So, from my experience, any transformation exercise that we've delivered, if there is leadership buy-in to ensure that there is ongoing commitment right from day one or even day zero till the day things are actually implemented, the success and the impact of that change is far more stronger and far more stickier, stays for a long period of time. So sustenance is a very important aspect to look into, because you can drive to change, but after a few days, people go back to their old habits, and it'll only sustain when people, one, understand what is it the benefit in it for them, why we're really going through this particular change, and how do we then continue to reap those benefits.
Super. And I like the fact that you mentioned about sustenance as one of the key elements to ensure that the learning or the continuation of the human-centric approach continues. Gunjan, just going a little deeper into this, there's this whole lot conversation about everything being personalized. So as part of the successful transformation projects that you've been leading, have there been any cases where personalization was significantly improved as part of the project, or you could share some insights in terms of how the learners could get that experience of everything being personalized to them?
Sure. So for us, we really believe that it's very important to think about your customer, and our
Yeah,
customer
yeah,
for from an HR function is basically the employees of, the recipients of the service that you're receiving from HR. So a very recent example, we actually conducted a employee experience study for an organization, and you cannot do that study successfully unless you personalize it. And what I
yeah,
mean by that is that you have many different personas in an organization, some who've been in the organization for many, many years, some who are new, but some who are new only from, not only from tenure perspective, but they're new to the workforce. Gender differences, nationality differences, there are so many different personalities that exist in an organization, and claiming that I want to be an employer of choice, which means one word and that's going to be common for the whole employee base, is just something that I think organizations are moving away from. And at our firm, we take that extremely seriously. It's ensuring that you create these cohorts of or segments and personas, as we call them, which basically have common characteristics, right? Because it's also unreal to do it for, let's say, an organization as 1,000 people. You're not creating employee strategies for 1,000 individual employees, but you'd identify through focus group discussions, surveys, getting to know people better, that there are common characteristics that drive a common group of people. And once you have those personas identified in an organization, you can then actually strategically plan for which personas would have a better sentiment for certain behaviors, right? Not everybody wants to work from home, not everybody wants a flexible work offering, not everybody wants benefits, and that's why in certain countries you'll see people have option of flexible benefits versus people
right,
have
right.
consolidated benefits. So these are all well thought of and crafted when you actually start getting few levels deeper after you do an employee engagement survey or an employee experience survey, as we call it, because that's when you really get to the nitty gritties of what you need to personalize in form of an initiative or a roadmap for that organization.
Absolutely. And just, I think, to add to your thoughts, again, based on our experience, Gunjan, when we interact with a lot of clients, I think what comes out very strongly is, the future of learning or future of engagement is all about empowering the individual with absolutely personalized insights, a lot of flexibility, a lot of choice, and a lot of autonomy to do in terms of at their pace, and also ensure that the guidelines or the goals of the organization or the transformation are absolutely met. Just going a little deeper, and again, going back to the amazing experience that you carry, Gunjan, as a licensed culture coach and a certified facilitator. How do you actually end up tailoring leadership development programs to meet the unique needs of the individuals and the organization? So again, it's related to personalization, but there are times the organization has a certain criteria that this needs to happen, but at the same time, you need to keep the individual also super engaged and excited. Any insights, any thoughts on that, Gunjan?
Yeah, I mean, I have a couple of thoughts. A couple of thoughts are raising in my
Yeah,
head when
yeah,
you
yeah.
ask me this question. So, firstly, I look at coaching as, let's say, hypnotherapy, because my father at some point used to actually do hypnosis for his patients,
Wow,
and
wow,
he
wow.
would always tell me that I'm going to hypnotize you to study more. And I would say
Right.
I don't want to. So when I'm not willing to make a change, I don't think any amount of coaching is going to help anybody. So number one, I think the acknowledgement and acceptance of going through a process is extremely important for anybody to make a change, right? And some people, even if they don't acknowledge, after a few sessions they see the benefit of it, and that's only when they actually continue in terms of sustainability of the outcome of the processes. Now during this, because I confess to you that I did not like studying at all, the reality is that maybe I didn't like studying books, but when somebody sat me across the table and actually explained the same concept to me that is written in a book, that has stayed to me with me till date. So for me, you cannot do anything, whether it is, talking to your kid, talking to your parent, talking to a teacher, to a CEO, or to anybody, if it is not customized or personalized to what they are willing to be receptive to, there is no change that you can drive in a system, no decision that you can actually go forward with. So it's always about playing on the other individual's strengths, and understanding what really makes sense to them. So that's the same policy we follow in coaching as well, because if you don't understand the person and you go in with the mindset in session one that I'm going to change you fundamentally, I don't think it's going to go anywhere. So it's extremely important to understand what they're expecting, what they're thinking, why they're going through this process,
Right.
and
Right.
certain conflicting aspects of their own thinking process.
Right. Right.
For me, personalization is extremely important. Yeah.
Right, right. And just out of curiosity, Gunjan, you said your father was into hypnosis. Did you experience that anytime as part of growing up and
No,
getting
I refuse to go
hypnotized?
through it.
Okay. Okay, sure. And Gunjan, again, going a little deep in terms of you spoke about the technology, the change in terms of a lot of conversations around Gen AI, AI automation coming in. How do you think it's going to impact the organizational design and workforce transformation? Do you think in the next couple of months or years there is going to be a redefining of the strategy in terms of how talent transformation needs to take place, keeping in view the workforce is scattered now, maybe not everyone together in one location, as you rightly said, things have changed drastically after COVID. How do you see that change happening?
Yeah, it's a very heavy question, Manu, because there are three different
Just
parts
feel free to
to.
pace it out your way.
Yeah, sure. It's just that it's three different parts, right? Because
Yeah,
technology cannot be successful without having the change driven on the organization process as well as the employee. So it's going to sit as a foundation for changes across all these three
absolutely.
pillars. So typically, when we would design an organization structure, you would always take into consideration, other than the strategic plans of the organization, also the operational realities of an organization. How do they operate? Where their boundaries of responsibilities are, interdependencies, process flows, which influence how an organization will be structured. And if you implement AI or any modern technology which basically takes away this dependency on a particular interdependency or a process flow, it essentially helps you make better decisions of how things could be centralized, decentralized, or maybe not required from a placement in an org structure by itself. That same input goes into the workforce planning, because if there are certain activities that are now automated and don't need to be done, then your workforce shape of their job itself changes. Some become redundant, some actually get reshaped. And we talk to a lot of our clients about this, because even though an organization goes to a technology enablement, it doesn't mean that an organization's workforce is going to be redundant. But there are parts of jobs that will start becoming more automated, and thus they will then transfer those skills into activities which are more strategic in nature or can be reskilled and upskilled. And that's why it's becoming important for organizations to pilot it today and start thinking about that future, so that the people in the workforce can actually be reskilled and upskilled as the technologies start getting implemented. So I see it from a fact that now the way the workforce is going to be managed from a talent perspective is going to be mostly skill based. And
Right,
again, it's
right,
a common topic that you hear very often in the market. But essentially, the reason for the shift is because we're not talking about completely eradicating roles. there are roles which have composition of skills, and some of those skills are not going to be required, and thus you shift those skills into more fungible or adaptable skills, which can then be moved on to different career paths. So
Right.
this is where you'll start managing talent from hiring from on a skill-based agenda of what you want to build in your organization, then give them the career path shifts, because we're talking still next 3 to 4 years, but after that, who
Absolutely.
knows what technology comes in, they may further need to be adapted into other subsequent roles.
Right. And to have this shift which is happening, Gunjan, what do you think are the kind of resistance that can come from employees? Like, what you mentioned, and that's something which is talk of the town in terms of moving from a role-based to a skill-based organization. Do you think there's going to be resistance for this change to happen, or the technology coming in, the adoption of technology, creating that, having that that digital mindset or that digital culture within the organization? While the technology may be there, but possibly the leaders are not ready, the people are not ready. So how do you think that resistance to change can be taken care of? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think it's a the starting point of any change management process
Yeah,
is
yeah,
awareness, right? And people are still right now talking about it. Organizations are in exploratory stage, but all the conversations we had in terms of line managers understanding, individuals understanding the reason for this change and what exactly the process of this change is. The more we talk about it openly, right now
yeah,
it's in conversations behind closed doors. Should we try a chatbot? Should we try new artificial intelligence? But the more it's spoken about, maybe in open circles, open forums, you start creating that cascade of digital mindset across an organization. And when you start seeing the reason for the change and the benefit for the change, then I believe that there will be less resistance. Because right now, in fact, we conducted a survey last year, and you'd be surprised at how high the rating was in terms of everybody's ready for digital change, but
yeah.
at the same time, everybody's apprehensive. And that's purely because the gap of what we should be doing vis-a-vis what and how we should do it is a bit very wide right now, and that's the gap that needs to be closed. So the more people talk about it internally, whether it's on agendas or innovation circles or whatever initiatives organizations have, I think that's going to close the gap more.
Absolutely. And I think it's all about, end of the day, it's all about how leaders can address that by clearly communicating, the benefits of change, or, having a human-centric approach by involving employees at the right stage to,
Absolutely.
for them to have the right experience and make sure that the entire change process which happens is absolutely valued and heard properly. Going a little deeper into one of the things that I mentioned as part of the introduction, Gunjan, is your experience in DEI. So without any putting any specific question there, any insights in terms of a lot of focus for organizations on DEI at again going back to creating a critical or a human-centric organization. How do you think this is moving specifically in the region where you are, which is primarily the Middle East? Do you see this change or this focus or this priority emerging very strongly there as well?
Yeah. See, I think in the region you have commitments from various, bodies primarily
Yeah,
to
yeah,
drive gender balance. So there is a lot of emphasis and assurance that ideally organizations would be moving towards having more representation of both nationalities as well as genders on boards,
right.
on committees. In terms of succession planning, there are regulations. So there is definitely move and shift in the right direction. When it comes to my role, for example, I play two roles. One is a client facing role at KPMG, where I would be advising clients on the EI strategies. And second, I actually manage the EI for KPMG within the organization as well. And I'd say the challenges in any organization that you run it in are pretty similar. There are pockets of people who are just inclusive in nature, and then there are pockets of people who need to be taught how to be inclusive. So from our end, what we try to do, and we push across to all our client businesses, is to ensure that typically the culture of inclusivity is built, because the more understanding or acceptance of inclusivity you have, then equity and diversity comes almost automatically with it. And whether that's through training programs or whether that's through just being mindful of the fact that you're
Yeah,
including everybody in the process of conversations, talking the same language, using words, not stereotyping. So statements of, which are commonly understood in your region but not understood in another region. So we teach a lot of practices in terms of language, symbols, behaviors, more internally from that internally, as well as with clients from the perspective of just building that entire culture of inclusion. And of course, as every other organization, there comes then focused areas of where we need to push and build certain diversity targets and agendas. So that's my perspective. I think that you need to hold people accountable for it, and you need to drive that agenda across an organization, because what's not spoken about is not known and not worked towards.
Absolutely, absolutely. And just leading from that, because the focus on DEI as one, then sustainability to a large extent, yeah, and this whole conversation about organizations and leaders being future ready, and how we see it at KNOLSKAPE is all about helping the organization to be future ready through personalized learning, through future ready competencies, which are so very important for the leaders. Uh, Part of your experience and the conversations possibly you would be having with your clients and absolutely in your ecosystem, what do you think is the next big shift organizations must prepare uh, to have absolutely future proof workforce ready to deploy?
I don't know if it would be future proof entirely, but definitely I think that the few things that we spoke about, which
Yeah.
is a skill based economy
Yes.
in general, ensuring that you're managing your talent through skills as opposed to a very, what you say, boundary roles is
Yes.
number one. Second is preparing the workforce for having a digital mindset.
Right.
Number two, I think employee well-being and working for purpose is not going to go anywhere, and is remains to be at the heart of many generations, where you ensure that there is mental as well as physical, financial, occupational well-being overall in an organization. I think these three are primarily the most important for me, and what's the most we see in the market in terms of how organizations are actually adapting and adopting as they go ahead.
Absolutely. And that, Gunjan, was my last question for this podcast. And I just want to thank you so much for this lovely chat. I'm sure the viewers and our listeners across will have found great value in and learning from your insights and rich experience that you bring on the table. Thanks to all our viewers and listeners for tuning in to the Learning Curve. We'll return the next episode with another great personality and, of course, insights on preparing organizations, leaders, and the workforce for the future. Until then, take care and goodbye.